it's so awesome to be able to send one email and you got someone a $20 million investment, you know, that's how cool
Change
is
someone's
that?
life,
Like, what a job. But a lot of people will give up along the way, and that is the moat, right? Maybe the number one attribute you need is being a good fundraiser. If you build something unique, you can also build a business that is like
incredible,
wildly profitable.
Morgan, welcome to Venture Grounds.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. Why don't you give everyone a background on yourself and tell us a little bit more about M13?
Awesome, no problem. So in terms of myself, I've been at M13 about 5 years. I lead a lot of our workflow automation investing and healthcare investing. And prior to M13, I actually worked in politics. I actually had my own consultancy where I did work with startups. I worked with companies in the political media arena, and I also worked with nonprofits. Was really passionate and excited about the government space, and then ultimately found my way back to the business side of things. I had started my career at Morgan Stanley, where I actually worked mostly covering companies in the BPO and outsourced services space. So a very full circle moment with AI, which is automating a lot of those categories and where I spend a lot of my time now. In terms of M13, we're an early stage fund. So we do the earliest of, idea and conception investing all the way through to Series B investing. So our check sizes range around 1 million all the way to 20 million. And we're lucky to be investors in Row, of course, and very excited to be working with you all. And I think our model is unique for the main reason that we've invested a lot in our platform support operations department. So actually the majority of our staff focuses on that. We have about 8 investors that deploy capital. Everybody else on the team is focused on supporting our companies. And we've got operators who have really good expertise around areas like branding communications, product, data analytics, hiring and talent. And we pair them with, full staffs of teams to actually get their hands dirty and do work with our companies. So that's, I would say, our big differentiator in terms of how we work with our founders.
I love it. We've experienced that firsthand. You guys do a great job. Well, first of all, congratulations on becoming partner. Super exciting and awesome. What decision are you now less willing to compromise on that you might have tolerated earlier in your career?
First off, thank you so much. And of course, like everything in this industry, it's all due to the founders that I work with. So thank you to them first and foremost. In terms of making compromises, I think this is a great question. And I do think the one thing sort of in that vein of everything centered around founders is I'm less willing to compromise on founder investor fit, actually. So I think there's certain founders where I'm maybe not a fit, and that can be because I'm not passionate about the industry. That can be because I don't have the right industry expertise or connections. It can also just be the connection between the founder. I mean, these are, decade-long relationships. And I think that conviction and excitement about working together compounds. And it's important to have that. And maybe they're a better fit for someone else at M13 or maybe just an external fund.
Yeah.
And I think being okay with that has been a shift in my mentality. I love nothing more than getting revenue from my portfolio companies than making meaningful connections for them. And that really can only happen when you're very aligned and sort of that founder investor fit.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe even doubling down on that, like, you meet a founder who's not maybe a good fit for yourself. I mean, I've also seen you be helpful to them in making other introductions to other investors too, which I think is like incredibly thoughtful and kind of rare.
Yeah, it's really how I have approached the industry, and it has transparently served me well, I would say as well. But it comes from a place of it's so awesome to be able to send one email and you got someone a $20 million investment, that's how cool is that? Like, what a job. I mean, I feel very privileged to be in that position. And yes, of course, you hope these things come back around, in the ecosystem, and they often do. But for me, it's like actually the joy of being able to really, change someone's life or change their trajectory. And if it's not me, it might be somebody else, but it's really, I feel very privileged to be in that position to be able to offer support, whether it's, directly benefiting me in that moment or not.
Yeah, it's incredible. Everyone says boring regulated markets are a moat. In practice, how often do they just slow companies to death before ever getting leverage?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think first I want to bifurcate between regulated markets and slow and boring markets. So I'd say on the regulated side, there are mountains to climb in terms of clearing compliance thresholds, and specifically in areas like, let's say, insurance or government. I mean, there really are big hurdles that will slow you down before you can go and start selling. The flip side of that we've seen even in our own portfolio. So, probably you're familiar. We have companies in the portfolio like Prepared 911 that sells into 911 centers, Polymorphic that sells into local government, and those companies are often slower in the early years to be able to get that hockey stick like traction. But that's because they do have to build through those compliance hurdles as well as brand and reputation. I mean, it's not
Trust,
easy.
big time.
Trust,
Yeah.
the long sales cycles of government, and this applies in other sectors like insurance. And once you clear those hurdles, once you like sort of make it to the top of the mountain, you do have somewhat of a moat because everybody else has to climb that same mountain. And it's not built for everyone, right? So if you're not well capitalized, if you're not, highly motivated to make a dent in some of these industries, like it can be discouraging spending years just getting something off the ground before you really see that momentum. But there is this sort of, once you've made it to the top of the mountain, a lot of people are going to die along the way. But now you're sort of, everyone else has to climb that hill to catch up with you. So I do think the moat comes from kind of like being able to close out competition if you are successful in surviving and building a brand that allows regulated sort of stakeholders to trust you, right? I would say then on the flip side, when you think about just like slow, archaic, more boring industries where we are starting to see an incredible amount of innovation due to AI, really. These are often like legacy services industries that are now starting to automate. I think what's really unique there and creates these soft moats comes back to sort of the founders' understanding of those markets and their excitement and passion for really understanding the nuances and the complexities, because that's what creates really differentiated and great products. And there's just less people thinking about it. And so I would say the moat comes from understanding and from the depth of relationships in those markets to the point where you can really craft something that solves the customer's needs, but also can actually be implemented in that industry. For example, we have a company in the portfolio called Radiant Graph.
Oh, yeah.
And they're automating patient engagement solutions for big health insurance companies. So traditionally a hard market to sell into because the sales cycles are incredibly long. There's millions of stakeholders, and also the data is incredibly messy. And also the problem is complex. And not everyone has decades of experience, like the founder of this business, Anmol, who previously founded Ginger and ran AI and ML at Teladoc and Livongo, has experience like firsthand with these problems and understands the nuances and complexities and what really can create an unlock for the end customer. And I think that thought and then being able to translate to a product can very much be a moat.
Yeah. And you're getting in there early, and you're investing for the long haul, and this is going to take time, and you're there to be helpful and just really support them because like you understand this going in.
Yeah, and I think you can tell who's also taken the time, whether they're someone like Amal who's been like steeped in that industry, or whether it's somebody who's actually spent 2 years researching a new industry and speaking to every customer in the market and canvassing the market and building their in-depth understanding of that market. And so those are the people we like to back early on, and we are comfortable. And we've seen it, waiting several years before you really see an inflection, because that's kind of what it takes. But a lot of people will give up along the way, and that is the moat, right? In these slow, boring sectors.
Thank you. Most founders say distribution matters and then hand wave it. What's a real distribution advantage you've seen that looked trivial at seed but became impossible to catch later?
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. One is actually geographic density. So we've seen this again with both Polymorphic and Prepared in the local government space. So there's very interesting network effects of selling into like a concentrated state. And at seed stage, this can look like, oh, you're only in one market. It's maybe not a long-term sort of distribution advantage. But there's these network effects between sort of localities and constituents and buyers and word of mouth that actually create a very strong flywheel. And then you can kind of take that model and transplant it state by state.
Yep.
And that can be very, very powerful in building a really long-term distribution moat. I would say the other one that I've seen is a very, very good execution around a strategic partnership or an embedded partnership. People try the partnership route all the time. It's the execution around the partnership and the depth of that partnership that can actually propel companies. So in the healthcare space, we're seeing a lot of companies work with existing EMRs or work with BPOs, for instance, to really start their flywheel of earning credibility, servicing customers, getting those logos, and building a brand. I think the best example is probably like Epic and a bridge, and we'll see how that all plays out. But initially, in terms of being a key leader in the space, I mean, I think that served them very well. And so we've also seen that across the portfolio. It's again comes back down to execution of that partnership and alignment, and then sort of how you play it out in the future state. But in terms of getting early brand recognition, I think can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's funny. I was talking to someone last night about they were also selling into governments and hyper focused on different cities and locales in California, and then you own the state, and then you can parlay that to everybody else in every region there, and then you can move to Washington and like everything else. It just like that hyper focused execution is I think works really well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it can apply to other sectors, like specifically in healthcare as well. But I think there's really something interesting about government where, as a constituent, you might call 911 in one district, but maybe you're at your friend's house when you need to call 911, right? Or maybe you need a permit to host your child's birthday party, and your local park is busy, is fully booked, but maybe the one district over has an availability, right? And so there are these like natural network effects in our own life that they're technically different buyers, but they service the same people, right? And so if you can create those bridges between those people, I think it strengthens the ability for the product to spread.
Yeah, that's awesome. As the bar for Series A and B gets higher, what's the most convincing growth signal that still turns out to be fake 6 months later?
Yeah. It's a very good question, especially in this market, especially as rounds are condensing between A and B and even, seed, right?
B is the new A is the new seed. That's kind of like what I'm hearing constantly.
Yeah, and you just don't have time to really pick up on the most important signal, which to me is like buyer love, product love, like clear product market fit. Because oftentimes when you're doing these rounds, you have a lot of contracted revenue and not a ton of live revenue and not a ton of revenue that's been live more than a year, right? And so seeing those like expansion patterns in the data, seeing those usage behaviors is just less and less common when you have to make the decisions around these rounds right now. And so I would say contracted ARR is, a signal that there is clear pull from the market for a solution. It's often a misleading signal on, is this the right solution? Is this the right company and the right product? Because you just don't have enough data in terms of like how a team can execute on implementation at scale and consistently continue to keep their customers incredibly happy and drive that exciting usage that makes it a lasting product. So contracted ARR is something that is like a signal of demand, and we look at it and it's exciting. And it's very exciting that buyers are willing to be experimental right now and to make change, but it is often misleading, I would say.
Thank you. When 10 startups look identical on paper, what's one signal you'll bet on, even if the data isn't there yet?
Yeah, especially for me, I invest incredibly early, and I'm always really betting on a team. And so that's the number one thing. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's really the depth of the team's understanding around a market, and then the characteristics of that founder that give us conviction that they're going to go all the way in terms of running through walls to build a generational business. And I think when it comes to the understanding of the market, and this is why I'm so drawn to complex markets that just don't appeal to everyone, right? And I think that it takes a special type of person who has an interest, the technical ability to make change in a market like that, and ability to talk to and convince buyers in a space that usually aren't used to buying software, right? We've seen this really interesting change in legacy industries, wanting to adopt AI technology because it fundamentally changes the margins of their business and actually puts money in their pocket. But talking to those people, talking to stakeholders in those businesses, empathizing with them while selling this transformational technology, it really takes a special type of person. And that's why I love spending time in boring sectors that not everyone from Silicon Valley is willing to spend time, bonding with those buyers and spending the next 10 years of their life working on that specific problem, because they are industries that haven't typically attracted, the natural tech talent founder.
Yeah, it's incredible. AI advertising is brutally competitive and unforgiving. What did Context do early that separated from the dozens of AI ad startups that are never going to matter?
Yeah, I love that you picked this one to talk about, specifically for me, because I spent almost 2 years looking at this category.
Wow.
Yeah, we could talk about, all the businesses we met, and some of them are probably going to be awesome businesses as well. And so very excited for them on their journey. But I would say that AI advertising is a brutal industry. It also produces some of the biggest companies in the world: Google, Meta,
Moving so
Trade
fast
Desk.
right now. It's
And
crazy.
now is a time where it's breaking wide open, and
wide
there is an opportunity for brand new sort of generational businesses, like we saw with social media and sort of all other waves of transformation in advertising, and in sort of the way consumers interact with search, right? So I would say there's a lot of businesses in the GEO space that we thought are incredibly compelling, incredibly interesting, and are doing very well. And I think what's interesting there is there are low product moats, in our opinion there. A lot of those products are the same. Of course, you can have amazing execution and distribution, and that can build great businesses. But what we love about Context is they are going straight for the meat of the problem. They're starting in the infrastructure layer, and they are directly trying to deliver contextual advertisements inside of generative chat experiences and generative search experiences. And it's a much harder technical problem.
Yeah.
And it requires things like retraining existing bidding algorithms from DSP side of things. It requires very complex integrations. It actually requires reimagining what an ad unit looks like in this new age. And so I think by focusing directly on the infrastructure layer in a space that we think is going to be incredibly valuable, being there first, being a thought leader in that space, and building up that infrastructure for when we believe the market breaks wide open, they're very well positioned, and will have some technical moats that we think places them in an ideal position to capture a large amount of value in that market. And so while those other businesses, I think, are going to be exciting, we just wanted to go one layer deeper in the stack, and go straight to the heart of the problem.
Maybe we're not everyone
How
else
do you
is
serve
looking,
contextual?
like you said.
How do you serve generative ads, right? Like, let's just go right to the heart of the problem. A lot of those companies that we spend time with in and around optimization and GEO, like, eventually they want to take part in that because that is, going to be the core sort of driver. But we found a company that's doing it today, doing it early, and we're very excited.
Agentic workflows demo well and fail quietly. What's the hard part founders underestimate about real, like, replacing back office work?
Yeah. I think, especially in the companies that I spend time in, they are legacy, they are complex. I think the two areas where it gets very complicated are people change, people management.
Yeah.
You've got people who have been doing this for 10 or 20 years, sitting in their seat. They've figured out their workflow and
don't want to change.
They don't want to change. And it is, and some of them want to change, but they're scared about the implications, for
they
their
have
team.
A job.
Yeah, for them and themselves and their team, right? And I think what I've seen be very successful, and what I think is ultimately good, for these people as well, is convincing them that, they're not being replaced, convincing them and showing them they're not being replaced. You're just being supercharged, right? Enhanced. And there's a lot of sectors that we spend time in. A few of my portfolio, one in the temp staffing market, and then, polymorphic in the community government market, where there just aren't enough people to do these jobs, honestly. And it's impacting the businesses. We also see this a lot in the home health market. They just can't get enough people to do this.
Such a stressful job.
It's a stressful job. It's, for the business owner, they have to scale people every time they scale growth. And there aren't people who are excited about doing this work. So can you take your same workforce, you're not decimating the workforce, you're supercharging them, and you're actually building a business that's much more profitable, and where those people, if they're aligned properly from an incentive perspective, are also making more money because they can do more. Fundamentally,
like for the customers too.
Yeah, think about recruiting. I mean, you're capped on how many meetings you can take and how many screens you can do, but that's all changing now. And so that can unlock much more commission and revenue stream for those people. And if you align those incentives, I think it can be really powerful in making change across stakeholders. The other area that's very hard, especially in spaces I spend time, is truly integrating. These are industries with very legacy systems of record. Some don't have APIs. The data schemas and structures are incredibly messy. And actually getting in there and integrating your product so that it reads and writes in and out of old systems of record, so that the workflow isn't choppy for the end user. And so that all the complexity is kind of buried and hidden, and it's just a magical experience. That's very hard to do still. So even as kind of like building, applications and demos becomes a little easier, that core unsexy integration work is still a very big differentiator for companies.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of trust in the founders, and I think it's important for them to like go on site and meet these people and really understand those problems and get to building it behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. You want people who are extremely close to their customer.
Yeah.
And that's actually why sometimes I like backing people who have built a company in the space before and know the pain points like very intimately. Yeah, and they know like the nooks and crannies and the edge cases that are actually, very, very difficult to automate. And they can speak the same language as the buyer. And that's, been really exciting to see work well in some of the industries we spend time in.
Thank you. You back founders for a long, unsexy slog.
Yeah.
What's the earliest sign a founder can't survive the grind, even if the idea looks great?
Yeah, this might be a very obvious one, like to answer this question, but I would say it's giving up when it gets hard. Then, naturally you're not going to survive. But I think, there's people who will wait, 5 to 10 years for something to take off, and they'll keep iterating and they'll keep moving in the market because they're just so stubborn and so passionate, and they just won't give up. And to be fair, that's not for everyone, and that's maybe not the right decision at all times for people, like to spend their whole life doing something when it's not working. And not everyone's made to be a founder, but a lot of the successful founders that I've been around, they either create the opportunity if their first idea wasn't in the right market at the right time, or they have so much conviction that they align themselves for when the timing, catches up to their product, that they're there to capitalize on it. Because it's easy to give up when it's hard. And if that's the right thing for that person, like no judgment at all, of course. But it's been really exciting. So I think of a company in our portfolio called Canvas Medical, which has been around 10 years. And they are building a customized EMR for clinicians.
Beast of a problem.
Beast of a problem, incredibly hard problem. And, historically, switching your EMR was a huge undertaking. And just didn't have the same level of ROI that it has today. And Canvas has really positioned themselves because they were built with a developer-first SDK that allows you to customize care pathways for this world of agents, where now not only can you build a customized care model, but you can actually automate your back office inside of your EMR by building your own agents that speak directly into your clinical records and have integrations, with pharma and referral management and all these really exciting things. So you can build like a native operating system inside of Canvas now, allows you to automate your back office as well as being your system of record, which is just really compelling positioning. But that wasn't really as obvious to the buyer even 12 months ago. And so we've seen just an incredible sort of revitalization and growth in that business because of the market changing. But you have to be there at the right time to capture that. And it would have been easy to give up at some point when, hey, people don't want to switch their EMR, AI is a little bit further out in terms of really automating this back office work than we thought. But by sticking with it and being creative, to stay alive, essentially, right? Like that's kind of what it's about. It's like stay alive, survive until the market's ready, or until you've sort of positioned yourself behind an awesome tailwind. And so that's exactly what they've been able to do, and it's transformed the business, and the growth has been incredible. So we definitely look for founders that are stubborn and creative, and are willing to sort of run through walls and withstand all the punches, because there's a lot of them, and it's really hard, and it's okay to give up, but we're looking for those people who are unlikely to give up until they've pulled every single rabbit out of the hat.
And even expanding on that, if there is there anything pre-writing a check to someone like that kind of tips you off that they have that, like that you see, you're like, oh, I believe this person can run through walls, even though they haven't done that yet, is there anything that you're like, okay, like this is something that I see, and if I see this, that kind of gives you some of that signal?
There's a few things, and it really depends on the person. It's like person dependent, right? But like I work with a lot of second time founders, and oftentimes they experienced so they've already done something hard, right? And understanding kind of like where that first founder journey took them and why this is different in terms of...
They choose to do it again. It already kind of gives you a lot.
That's a huge signal. And especially if there was something about their experience before where they identified something that they find to be an even bigger opportunity or an even harder opportunity, and they're willing to go back when they don't need to, right? So that is like a very, very strong signal for me. I would say like even young folks who are now starting companies, have they done something really hard and exceptional before in their life? Like, were they a competitive athlete? That's always a good one. But it doesn't have to be athletics. It can really be anything. Were they competitive in like an academic arena, like debating or something like that? Like, do they want to be the best?
They want to win.
They want to win. Yeah. I think that's a huge signal. And it could be that. And to the sort of point on like running through walls, I think like those competitive instincts are really important. And then I also think the creativity aspect is this person a tinkerer, right? Like, have they been, playing with technology? Have they been like, lots of folks that I find really compelling, they started little side businesses and they made money. Like, do they want to make money?
Yeah.
Kind of speaks to, do you want to win? But it's also like, do you want to build a business? Yeah. A lot of people want to like get funding and work on something cool, but like, and that's also really awesome for innovation and technology. But like, I want to work with people who are like dead set on creating businesses. It requires creativity, it requires wanting to win, but also requires being thoughtful about making money, And so a lot of these folks who are young, they've done side hustles, and they've built little internet businesses, and they've been able to sustain themselves on that. It's very interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially as AI, blows the doors open for, what it takes to build a product and what it takes to like launch a company, even if it's not a venture-backed company, right?
Yeah, consumer apps or like something small.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, on to the espresso round. What's one view you hold about the market that most investors would disagree with?
Well, I don't know how many people would, I feel like probably it's like you'd be on one side or the other of this. But I do think sometimes it's not always I think sometimes fundraising can create winners, which like I don't want to be on the side of that, but I think I actually do believe it. Like, I think that, a lot of investors will say, just raising capital to raise capital, like, isn't a good decision. And like, it really depends person by person, right? But I would say that, building a war chest, being able to acquire your competitors, even if you're, maybe starting from a less than ideal positioning with your product, gives you every opportunity to go back and maybe correct sort of some of that in the long term.
So just pure skill in fundraising.
I think maybe the number one attribute of being successful, maybe to like rephrase exactly what would be controversial, is like maybe the number one attribute you need is being a good fundraiser. Yeah.
What's one conviction you've completely rethought in the past year?
I think it's partially what I just actually talked about, which is like, I think, I don't think it's like, I don't think it's contrarian to say that luck is like very, very important in this industry. But I think more and more it's like right time, right place can crown winners faster than you think.
Seems like the time's right now.
And that time is happening right now, right? So it's very topical. To be fair, like, that doesn't mean there's not going to be great companies that are overlooked and that don't build their business around, hype and fundraising. Like, I fully believe that. But I do think in this market right now, you can be crowned a winner just kind of on that momentum alone. And it has so many downstream snowball effects for talent and for, confidence with customers and opening a million doors that can kind of blow past your competitors, regardless of sort of, product and founder quality in other aspects as well.
I think that confidence is like a huge thing, right? Coming off a big fundraise, it just like, it gives you that like push from the back that you're just like, okay, I can tackle anything.
Yeah, the confidence is amazing, and transformative, like off the back of these big fundraisers, especially knowing people early on who maybe struggled to raise in the earlier days, or were sort of pivoting around in ideas, and then they get that big fundraise, and things kind of just take off from there. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to see.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
What's the risk most of venture is sleepwalking past right
now? Okay, this one, I don't know if people are sleepwalking, but I just find this to be the biggest risk. But like overfunding the market with with a bunch of companies, like actually drains the talent that you need for your best companies to be successful.
I mean, to hire founding engineers, it's insanely competitive. And I always ask them, like, how do you do it? Like, how are you able to convince that person when there's like hundreds of companies every quarter?
Yeah,
Thousands.
It's amazing. I actually just talked to a very senior person at a senior research lab who's leaving, and I was shocked. He said, "Oh, of course I can start my own research lab, tomorrow, right?" But he's like, "I'm actually thinking about joining." Like, and I was like, another research lab, perhaps. But oftentimes what you're seeing is like even before those people leave, they have like $100 million, right? And so instead of them, going to existing companies or being on the market. For companies that like venture funds have also already funded, they're going out and starting their own thing. And actually, like, of course, it's amazing for people to have that opportunity. And it is what creates such an amazing, vibrant tech ecosystem in America. But at the same time, it's almost like not everyone is meant to be a founder. These, sort of accelerators and stuff like that,
Correct.
They're amazing, but it gives everyone really, maybe not everyone, but it gives a lot of people the option to be a founder versus actually going and building something. And we maybe don't need as many companies really doing the same thing.
You can get pretty far off of like, you go into an accelerator and then you can kind of come out of that if you know very quick if this is for you or not.
That's true. And everyone, and that's why there's no shame, like I said, in, actually this journey isn't for me, or maybe it's not for me right now, right? And so that's like very normal and an acceptable part of the venture ecosystem. But I do think by making capital so easy as VCs, we also hurt our existing portfolio companies because really we want to consolidate a lot of talent. And pick the best people who are not just brilliant and good at building, but are actually the best like leaders, the best fundraisers, the best navigators of industries. And I think by saying like, oh, here's another amazing person over here, let's write them a check. In some way, you're cannibalizing a lot of what could propel some of your other companies, right? So I think it's a big risk.
If anything, you create more founders who fail that then are the great first employees at other exceptional companies.
Yeah.
Because like you have what it takes to go out there, take that risk. You try to build something, you failed, but maybe it really wasn't the right thing for you, and you find some other incredible company to go join, and you're an exceptional employee.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, to your point, like we have people even at M13, like a lot of our, amazing operators, like built businesses, sold businesses, started businesses, shut down businesses, right? And I mean, it's great for the ecosystem in a way, but it's also just a big risk because the hardest thing for my companies is finding talent. And they're all fighting over like the same people ultimately. Yeah.
Who's a company, founder, or sector you're fascinated by at the moment, and why?
So a company I'm really fascinated by right now is a public company that I've been recently looking into called Neptune Flood. Wow. Have you ever heard of it?
Never heard of it. No idea.
It's in the insurance space, and they're, I want to say, between a $3 and $4 billion business. They are an asset-light insurance provider in the flood market. Yeah, and so they don't take on, capital requirements, heavy capital requirements. They're an underwriter, and they've built a unique product in the flood market. But I believe they have 58 employees.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
I love insurance.
Insurance is a great business, first of all, that's for sure. But also in this new day and age where you don't need to have these heavy capital requirements, and when you can use, you can leverage AI for so many different aspects of the job. I think these businesses where you might have thought one single sort of solution, just flood insurance, maybe it's a niche market, distribution is hard, but you can kind of, if you build something unique, you can also build a business that is like
incredible,
wildly profitable, and you know, doesn't require a lot of human labor. And so to see like a public company with that sort of construct has been very interesting to me. And I've also seen, you know, in and around insurance where I do spend a lot of time, other examples of that. There's another one that's public called Goosehead Insurance. It's I think around a $9 billion company the last time I looked, with an interesting franchise model. And I think a lot about, can you productize sort of like technology for these legacy industries, and then create a platform where, you know, you can have like a franchise-esque model where you just enable other people to go and run a business without other people, and without having to invest in their own technology stack. And so I'm looking at that across like the healthcare landscape, across like the staffing landscape, and across the insurance landscape. And so seeing examples of these public companies doing that, both sort of like Neptune Flood and Goosehead Insurance, have been like very, very, very inspiring.
Super cool. What's a founder red flag that's actually a green flag for you?
Yeah, I think that maybe back to our prior conversation, I think overconfidence can definitely be a red flag, but when you get the validation from the market, then it turns very heavily into a green flag. So, you know, acting as if you know something that you don't know can be a red flag, and it can lead to sort of like bad decisions and mistakes when you're making investments, just kind of blindly believing just a very confident figure. But at the same time, when they get the tailwinds behind them in terms of, you know, market validation, a big fundraise, you know, to our earlier sort of conversation, the market can quickly, you know, consolidate around them, and that confidence, you know, becomes justified, right?
Now you got to go execute.
So you might have some, you know, big blind spots. But you know, if you get sort of enough validation, then I think you can turn those you can solve for those blind spots, whether it's by finding the right people who now want to work with you, you know. So it can be a red flag, but can quickly turn green.
What do founders consistently get wrong about what VCs actually do?
I think that it really depends on sort of like the founder's understanding of venture, like if they're a second-time founder, if they've been around, you know, the market. So I think like second-time founders have a much different take on what investors do. They realize investors aren't there to build your business. They realize that, you know, investor's never gonna know your business as intimately as you do. And they're, you know, while if you know a sector well, you know, you can be thoughtful about helping with strategy and seeing what's going on out there in the market, and really like helping, you know, consolidate. Consolidate learnings from, you know, you're so heads down in your business, like consolidate learnings from what's happening in the market and maybe spark ideas and stuff like that. But they know that like if they want their business to be successful, like it will 100% be on them. I think what first time founders maybe don't appreciate as much, and kind of goes back to the learnings of a second time founder, is like really what you're looking for in a VC is a trusted partnership, and someone that's going to have your back when times are not good. And so I think a lot of maybe first time founders sometimes think that, you know, a flashy VC is going to help their company succeed, you know, because they know how to build great businesses. I think that's like a misconception.
But they don't work for you.
Yeah, they don't work for you. And if your company's not working, you know, depending of course on the person, you know, they might not be there to support you, right? And so I think that most people learn, you know, after a rep or two in the market, that it really comes down more to the individual person that you're working with, and how much, and how much your relationship with them is going to sustain you during the good and the bad times.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we've got.
Cool.
Thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.